February, have public comment opportunity. A couple of action items today regarding the Transportation Improvement Program, both the endorsement of amendments Cycle B and Cycle C, as well as a presentation of a resolution for the distribution of the Highway Improvement Program funds. Then we'll switch over to the informational items for today, which will include a presentation of updates to the fiscal years 2020-2021 Unified Planning Work Program, an update on the land use forecasts based on the feedback that we've received from you all, overview of the travel demand model, and then lastly, some reports as well as some other business before adjourning. So we have a quorum, and I think we can get the meeting started.
All right, Sean, thanks. With quorum being met, we will go ahead and call the May 6, 2020 Transportation Coordinating Committee meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is approval of the February 5th, 2020 meeting. So if there are any discussion items, say your name to be recognized, and then we can discuss those.
Yes, this is Bill McCord. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Language there attributed to me. I thought I had made a motion.
I'm sorry, it's breaking up on you.
Okay. If I talk slower.
Bill, you may want to post that question in the chat just in case we can't get the audio on you.
And anyone else who's not talking, if you'd please mute your mic, that would probably help a little.
Sorry, I'm not very quick typer. I'm not a good typer either. That's not very effective. It's not taking my typing. God almighty.
Okay, we can hear you fine. So if you'll just go ahead and state your question or comment.
In the minutes on page 2, at the top of the page, I thought I made my request in a form of a motion. It doesn't show that, but that may need to just to go check those minutes. And I don't think I got a second on that motion because the vote was not in favor. And then on the last page, the minutes, other business in the second paragraph, the last line, might want to look at how that's worded. Other than that, no problem with the minutes, and I would, after consideration of those things, that I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. We have a motion. Can I get a second?
This is Mike Harris. I'll second.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to break it out into everyone that says aye, and then if you choose to vote nay or abstain, we'll need to get your name for the record. So all those in favor, I'll say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, with that, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is for public comments. So if there's anyone from the public who would like to be heard, please state your name and the committee will hear you. So it looks like we have no public comments. So we'll move on to number 3, which is action items. The first action item we have is to endorse the amendment to the fiscal year 2023 TIP. And I will turn it over to Anna to inform us on this one.
Thank you, Glenn. Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Awesome. We have 2 cycles of amendments that we're going to be taking a look at this morning. One is to kind of finish up and move towards adoption of our amendment cycle B, which we all looked at together the first time in February. I probably won't walk through these one by one again, since this is our second viewing of these amendments, but just as a quick recap, we have 3 proposed amendments to add projects that were awarded through TDOT's Transportation Alternatives Program. And we have some funding being added to an ADA service capitalization grouping within the TIP. We have a request from Murfreesboro Public Transit to add some funding, adding some additional final funding to a Safe Routes to School project in Mount Juliet, and also adding highway infrastructure program funds, which are a new type of funds available to MPOs as of 2018. We're adding in our 2019 funds for that grouping. We also have an associated resolution with the addition of this funding type that I'm going to be walking through here in just a minute, but wanted to take any questions anybody may have on these amendments before we endorse them to the Transportation Policy Board for adoption later this month. And if we don't have any questions, I'll turn it back to you, Glenn.
Thank you, Anna. So with no questions.
I did.
Oh, 1 second.
I had one question, I believe. So from the last time we discussed these Cycle B amendments, we've added 3 projects as part of the amendment: the Rover funds, the multimodal funds in Mount Juliet, and the Highway Infrastructure Program grouping. And I read the resolution that we're going to consider later. So there's no particular project that those highway grouping funds are targeted to, or is it just to cover bits and pieces of other projects that need to get funded to finish them up?
Yeah, so at this, sorry, don't mean to interrupt. Oh, okay, so at this time, we don't have any specific projects that grouping is going to be targeted for. What we are going to be proposing via the resolution that we'll talk about in just a minute here is that we're able to use that funding type for projects that are eligible and are experiencing shortfalls in right-of-way and construction needs, so that we can get projects finished up that have cost overruns.
Okay. And could that also include funds for the Albert Gallatin extension? I know we've gone back and forth about finalizing the cost on that. So is that a possibility?
Yes, I do believe that's a type of project that would be eligible for this funding type. If we are to pass the resolution at the Transportation Policy Board meeting, I assume that we'll intend to set up a call for projects for those funds, potentially.
Okay, thank you.
All right, do we have any further questions on the items? With that, I will look for a motion to endorse the TIP Cycle B amendments for consideration by the Transportation Policy Board.
I'll motion for approval. This is Bill McCord.
I have a motion. Can I get a second?
This is Jim Kerr. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great, thanks. So now we're on to the next action item, which is a presentation of resolution TPB-2020-03 HIP distribution, and Anna will inform us on this one.
Thank you again, Glenn. As we've already discussed, we're going to be presenting this resolution to the Transportation Policy Board meeting later this month. We're proposing that we allow the distribution of this highway infrastructure program funding to projects with immediate needs. At the time, we have about 4.85 million available. It's going to be going into the TIP in this pot of funding. Eligible uses of this funding include construction of highways, bridges, and tunnels. I think that the most recent allocation of these funds for fiscal year 2020 has expanded upon that eligibility some. We're going to be looking into whether or not the previous year's allocations might be retroactive in terms of that eligibility. I think that's all I have in terms of facts on the resolution. I'm happy to take any questions anybody has about that as well.
Are there any questions for Anna?
Anna, this is Katrina Jones. Is this enacting an official call for projects for this, or will a call for projects come after the resolution is passed?
We're not enacting an official call for projects at this time. We'll probably, once the resolution passes, work on developing a method for how we're going to go about that. And we'll certainly be keeping everyone informed and letting everybody know when an opportunity is available.
And this is Michael, Skipper, just to add on to that. We talked internally about not really having a formal call for projects as we aim to cover cost overruns for projects that are going into obligation. Usually it's pretty straightforward identification process, but we'll make sure we're transparent about that as we go forward.
Yes, thank you, Michael. So just to clarify again, this won't be for new projects necessarily. This will be for cost overruns, right-of-way and construction needs for existing projects. Do we have any other questions?
Thanks, Anna. So with that, we will look for a motion to endorse resolution TPB-2020-03 HIP distribution. Can I get a motion?
This is Doug Demasi. I'll make a motion for this.
This
Thank
is
you.
Keith Free, and I will second that motion.
Great. Looks like we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Looks like the motion will move forward. Now we're on to item number 4, which is informational items. The first informational item we have on our agenda is a presentation of proposed updates to the fiscal year 2020-21 UPWP. And
Glenn, I think Anna
that
has one more set of amendments to cover.
Oh, sorry about that.
Sorry, I know we doubled up on the amendments this time.
Okay.
Hi again, everybody. Just one more amendment item, and I promise you'll be done with me. At this meeting, we're also kicking off our new amendment cycle C, which is our new cycle of amendments for the TIP. At this time, we have 5 proposed amendments. I just wanted to go ahead and let everyone know that we do anticipate probably about 9 more amendments that are going to be rolling in from TDOT in relation to the 3-year work program that was just approved. So we'll be passing along that information in the form of an additional packet once we have all that information from TDOT and are able to review those proposed amendments. But just to walk through what we have at this time, first proposed amendments requested by the City of Lebanon. They were provided state funds through TDOT's multimodal access grants for their Highway 231 North Sidewalk project. So we're adding those funds to the TIP. Following that, we are adding a project to the TIP from Mount Juliet. It's their Lebanon Road sidewalks project. It's phase 3 of a project that they've been pursuing along Lebanon Road. They were also awarded these funds through TDOT's multimodal access grants. We have a proposed amendment from TDOT involving the Dickerson Pike and CSX underpass reconstruction project in the Goodlettsville area. We are adding NHPP funds to those projects and slightly revising the project description to be more consistent with the proposed project. We have a request from Nashville MTA, also known as WEGO, for their North Nashville Transit Center project. This is an existing project in the TIP that was originally awarded funding through the MPO's Active Transportation Program. They were awarded additional funds by the state from the Multimodal Transportation Resources Division. They've been given Improve Act funds to further fund the construction of this project, so we're adding those funds to the TIP. And then finally, we have the first of a coming series of requests from TDOT. This is for the I-65 widening project, and this is State Route 25 to State Route 109. They're adding state funds to the project for construction and also clarifying the scope. And I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has about these proposed amendments.
Hey, Anna, this is Bill McCord. Those last 2 projects, those seem to be added on to the agenda. I didn't have those with me. You know how much those are for? What the money amount is?
The second 2, yeah, I think only the first 3 of these made it into everyone's agenda. The rest of them may have been attached to the meeting materials that Michael directed everyone to on the website. The North Nashville Transit Center project is adding $2,700,000 in state funds for construction. And then the I-65 widening project request from TDOT is adding $63 million in state funds that will later be converted to NHPP funds, so later converted to a federal funding source. They're doing this project by advanced construction.
And that I-65, that also includes Improve Act money?
I do think that the state funds identified at this time are Improve Act funds. Like I said, those are going to be converted to federal funds.
That is correct, Anna.
Thank you, Jonathan.
And the only other one I saw that maybe I've overlooked is the Dickerson Pike project over the railroad track and stuff. I know it's been on there for a while. $45 million, and would it be cheaper just to build a bridge over the tracks as opposed to try to build a new underpass? They thought about that for that kind of money?
Bill, I don't, to speak directly to your question, I don't know the answer to that, but the cost has come up in conversations and as early as yesterday. So the early planning level cost was significantly less than what it is. So it has increased quite a bit. So if you want any more details on that, I can provide that for you. But the original estimate was much lower than what it is.
Yeah, I just noticed it was a big ticket item and what kind of options they're looking at, considering what they've discovered so far. It's going to take a lot of money out of other projects, it looks like. Okay, that's all I had.
Thanks. Do we have any further questions for Anna on this TIP amendment? Hearing none, and just for clarification, we are under action items, and this is item A, and this is the amendment to the TIP cycle C. So I overlooked this one earlier, so we're heading back. So we'll look for a motion to endorse TIP cycle C amendment for consideration by the policy board.
Do we have to have a motion on that? It's just recommendations for information on it. Or we'll do this next.
No, we'll need a motion to.
Okay. I'm motion to approve the Cycle C amendments to the TPB. Bill McCord.
Thanks, Bill. So we have a motion. Can we get a second?
Katrina Jones, I second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thanks. So now I believe we're ready to move on to number 4, informational items. And the first item there is presentation of proposed updates to the fiscal year 2021 UPWP. And Sean will fill us in on this.
Thank you, Glenn. So as part of the upcoming amendment to the Unified Planning Work Program, there's a couple of things that were taken into consideration. On this slide, I'll talk through a couple of those. One is the program, some of the prior carryover funding into this current 2-year Unified Planning Work Program that stretches fiscal year 2020, the current federal fiscal year, as well as next year, 2021. As part of doing that, be identifying any additional planning activities to be carried out in federal fiscal year 2021. As part of this update too, since we'll be developing a new Unified Planning Work Program, we'll be functioning off of the 2-year work program, but things have changed since we developed the work program since last year, of making sure that we document and update any related planning activities that are underway or scheduled within the region. And typically this is from the leads like TDOT, transit providers, or local governments that are carrying out those planning activities within the region. And then also, we had a call for any new requests from members, and this is as we look to develop the next UPWP, the next 2-year UPWP, which would stretch federal fiscal year 2020 to 2023. And so based on what we've received so far from folks, just go to the next slide. So regarding the additional planning activities to take on in federal fiscal year 2021, We did hear from Wilson County, request for a regional traffic shed impact fee analysis, and I think this fits well with some of the identified activities that we had contained within the current Unified Planning Work Program, and so as we flush out what kind of work that will entail, I think that there's some great opportunities to incorporate that kind of analysis of different funding opportunities to advance transportation needs in the region. Regarding related planning activities underway, two activities that I think WeGo is wrapping up. One is the WeGo Star Rail Improvements Planning Study, and then also a regional park and ride investment strategy that we will make sure that we document as part of this amendment update. And then new requests that we received, one was the regional new school impact analysis. This came from Wilson County, looking at what the impact is throughout the region on a lot of the new school construction that's happening. We also received a request from Murray County on the behalf of Mount Pleasant for a major thoroughfare plan through the Unified Planning Work Program. Given that that wouldn't be an eligible activity, not regional planning in nature, we wouldn't be able to fund that project as a standalone. And then regarding the request for the regional new school analysis, I think this is something that we can consider as part of the development of the next Unified Planning Work Program as part of the next 2-year cycle. So that's what we've received so far. If there's anything else that folks want to inform us about or let us know or request, please do so in the very near future, as we are trying to wrap up these updates to package together into a formal UPWP amendment.
Sean,
Yes.
Bill McCord over in Gallatin. We had requested in the last update of the UPWP, collectively with the other cities in the county here in Sumner County, a regional, I don't know, we called it regional bike ped plan update for the whole county. And as I understood, it didn't make it in for funding for one reason or another. And I wonder if you could address why that project is not on the list, or should it be resubmitted, or if there's a disqualifier, what that might be. I think that'd be of interest to the rest of the Sumner County delegation too.
Sure, I think, and we have that one contained in the existing UPWP in the other planning activities section. I think that one is similar to the requests from Mount Pleasant on the major thoroughfare plan being that it would not be a eligible activity for the regional planning funds. Given it'd be more focused on the county effort developing the bike ped plan within the county.
And, I'll add here as well that I think to the extent y'all could, as we begin to get into deeper conversations about what we're already doing regionally on bike ped, as I think you all know, we have KCI under contract to update a lot of the analytics around bike ped planning, including conditions and of the system, level of comfort, latent demand, so on and so forth. I think it's a natural extension of the regional conversations to help you all think more locally about implementation. So I'd encourage you to use that as your tool or resources to get what you need at the local level for local plans, but funding local plans as a standalone project just isn't an eligible use of the regional planning dollars. And if you need more information about what we're already doing with respect to bike ped regionally, feel free to reach out to Sean on that.
Okay. Well, no disrespect for the other projects that are listed there and listed by a specific county. Why is this one, which is Sumner County and all the municipalities, any different than the traffic shed analysis or impact fee for Wilson County or the regional school impact analysis for just Wilson County? What's the difference there?
Bill, those are just the entities that submitted the requests, but those analyses are going to be regional in nature. Anything that we identify, traffic shed or impact fee analysis wise, that will be regional solutions that can be implemented across multiple counties or cities.
Hey, this is Josh Suddeth, Sumner County. I'd have to concur with Bill a little bit there. And once again, no disrespect to any of our colleagues or anything, but the Wilson County school impact analysis by definition must be county based. I mean, you can't have, kids from Trousdale County or Davidson County going to Wilson County schools. That'd be very unusual. So the traffic.
That is not a project that we're proposing for the UPWP, Josh. You'll see there, that's a deferral until we develop the new UPWP so we could talk about scoping and deliverables. So that's not something that's being considered right now. The only thing that we're adding, we're not even adding, it was already sort of in the program already as an extension of the sub-area study we did in Rutherford County and Davidson a couple of years ago, is a look at regional traffic shed analysis. That's the only thing that's being delineated as an additional activity within this UPWP. That request was submitted by Wilson County, but it's applicable to the entire region.
Okay.
Like I said, we're doing a regional bike ped study right now, so I would encourage y'all to participate in that to get what you need out of it for your own local planning process.
So just to clarify though, for Wilson County, once again, no disrespect to Wilson County or anything, but I mean, an impact fee analysis, Wilson County is not going to be collecting impact fees on development that goes on in some other county. It's going to, by definition, be confined to that county.
We're not doing it. I think that's where there's still a misinterpretation of what we're saying. We're not doing it for Wilson County. They just were the member who recommended we do a regional impact fee analysis.
Okay.
So, Michael, results of this study could be applicable and applied to any other jurisdiction in the region?
Absolutely. So looking at like who's even authorized to do impact fees, not all of you are. We need to do a regional assessment of that. What would it take to get y'all authorized to use impact fees if you don't currently do it? What are the best practices for administering the type of program and getting the money directed to the capital investments or operations and maintenance programs that you're interested in? I mean, looking at best practices and overarching eligibility issues and pathways to get something implemented is what we're going to be doing. We're not going to be designing an impact fee system specifically for Wilson County. We'll come up with best practices with an assessment of their legality and the way they would be best implemented as a menu of options for members across the region.
Okay.
Hey, Michael, this is Tom Brashear. I'm going to weigh in a little bit on the regional traffic shed side of that analysis that we requested. We've noticed that Williamson County has a traffic shed analysis that they did countywide some time ago, and they use that to good effect to, I won't say stop development, but I think, as I understand it, perhaps govern a little bit of development, govern down what densities might be permitted based on the ability of the road infrastructure around a particular development to sustain the impact of that development. And we're as much interested in that regionally as the impact fee analysis side. We are, in fact, interested in what the impact fee analysis side of this shows, but we're also very much interested in another tool that we can use locally to help us kind of navigate the overwhelming amount of development in some cases that we're getting in certain parts of the county, if not all of the county. And I think that probably follows suit region-wide right now.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Tom, is this idea of developing a new growth management tool for local communities. And just to put this in, that we would begin. This isn't, well, the priority right now is on updating the regional plan. I suspect that the regional plan itself will make a strong recommendation for the creation of new growth management tools and new funding options for transportation improvements. So this activity would be a follow-up to get that recommendation implemented regionally.
This is Bill McCord. So we can anticipate if the regional new school impact analysis study is adopted as part of the UPWP, that will contain opportunities or analysis of schools in all the counties in the planning region.
We're just not talking about that one right now. This is just that what we're saying is that was requested by Wilson County, and staff is recommending just deferring that until we develop the new UPWP and can have a broad enough conversation about what the aim would be there. We feel like it's suitable to move forward on the regional traffic shed impact fee analysis because this has been on our radar and we've been talking about this for the last 5 years. So they're distinct. We're wanting to scope out as part of this UPWP in the second year of 2021 following the adoption of the RTP, a regional growth management tool, an impact fee for transportation improvements. That's different than what's on this list for the school impact analysis, where there's a request made by Wilson County, but a GNRC staff recommendation that we just deferred that conversation until we begin to work on the next 2-year UPWP.
Okay.
Thank you, Sean.
That's all I have, unless there's any other questions.
Thanks, Sean. If there are no additional questions for staff, then we'll move on to the next informational item, which is an update on the land use forecast, and Max Baker will help us with that one.
Thanks, Glenn. Good morning, everybody. I wanted to catch everybody up on all the work that we have been doing over the last month for looking at the land use forecast. There is a updated handout given the revisions that we've made through some of the logic and the modeling that we've been doing with UrbanSim, as well as conversations that we've had with those of you that have reached out to us. And so I do appreciate y'all reaching out and taking the time to have those conversations. I think they've been fairly valuable so far, and encourage anybody that has any questions to continue to reach out to us so we can make sure that we're representing the communities as best as we can. And I believe those are available on the portal. Next slide, Sean. Additionally, we've made updates to the online application. So these have revised 2025 and have added 2045, given the latest iteration of the model, both for households and employment. So use these as references whenever you're wanting to vet what your expectations would be, or making sure that we're accurately representing your 2017. And the URL's there at the top. Next slide, please. And once again, I just wanted to remind everybody of the homework that was given last month. And if you have not been filling out the pipeline development worksheet and working with us to make sure that we're clearly understanding the way that you've entered it in, and that we're capturing it and we'll be representing it, please do so by the end of today. I think in order for us to stay on schedule with not only the land use forecast, but how it folds into the travel demand forecast. We really need to start wrapping these up. So please get those to us, and we would appreciate that. And we'll be following up with conversations to make sure that we understand the way that you are capturing that information. Next slide. Thank you. And this is just a summary of those of you that have submitted to us the pipeline development worksheet. And also, we've been having conversations with some of you that we had questions about, and some of those are actually in here. I know Sumner County hasn't submitted, but we did have conversations about how to interpret some of the zoning. So use this, and if you don't see your name up there as submitted, please do so by the end of today. And Glenn, I can turn it back to you or introduce Vince.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and keep going with the travel demand model overview, unless anyone has any questions on the update on the land use forecast.
Okay.
All right, Max.
Giving a presentation on our travel demand modeling is Vince Bernardin from RSG consulting firm that's been working with us for several years on our travel demand model. And really, this is what we've been doing all of the land use modeling for, is as a input into the travel demand model amongst other data sets that are used. And so Vince will walk us through kind of the history of travel demand modeling in our area, some of the data sources that are used, some of the output that we get from it, and the updates, bells and whistles that we're going to be able to have at our disposal for this regional plan as opposed to last time. So with that, Vince, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Max. There we go. Just quickly, thank you for that introduction. I wanted to just give you a little background on RSG, since we're more of a little bit of a national boutique consultancy, rather, so we don't have a big, Tennessee presence, but there are a little bit over 100 of us across the country in 8 offices. We were started by some Dartmouth faculty. Our focus is transportation analytics, and we're also a data provider, both in terms of survey data and big data for transportation. Next slide. And again, we do work, both for the private and public sectors in transportation across the country. Work with a lot of DOTs and MPOs. As well as the federal government and so forth. Next slide. In particular, we're one of the leading firms in terms of expertise and experience in developing activity-based models, which is the type of model that we've helped develop for you here in the Nashville region. These are other places that we have developed activity-based models across the country. Our staff has been involved actually in the development of a little over half of the activity-based models in the U.S. And I don't think I have it on there, but we're also developers of Beijing's model. Next slide. So I always love to start out with what I think should be probably the mantra for all modelers, which is a reminder of kind of what we're doing this for, and that this is not, that no matter what, a model is a simplification of reality. It's going to be wrong in various ways, but the hope is that despite that, that it can be useful. It can be a useful tool. So I'm hoping that's the case for your model for the Nashville region, and I hope also that I can just shine a little flashlight on the black box, so to speak, so that you guys can have a little bit more understanding, both about how your model is wrong but also how it's right, and it may be useful and helpful for you in supporting planning and analysis in your region. Next slide. I do think it's important to I really mean it when I say I hope that you'll understand the limitations of your model. This is the regional model that we're talking about, by the way. Sometimes for various analysis, either GNRC or very possibly some of you might use other types of modeling tools more focused on small-scale traffic operations, things like synchro or sim traffic, or HCS software, focused on often kind of signal operations and so forth. This model, the regional model that the MPO maintains, is different in nature. It's more of a macroscopic model. So it's trying to understand travel through the whole region rather than kind of focused at the micro level. And so a lot of its limitations are due to its resolution, due to the fact that the focus is way up at a regional scale, and that you can't just computationally and for some other technical reasons, it becomes difficult to maintain that the really fine details at that scale. So there's no operational details like turning lanes and signal timings, right? That the model knows that there is a signal somewhere, but it makes some very simple default assumptions about how that signal operates. The model is not dynamic like a simulation model. It treats travel flows as static flows for for a multi-hour period. And so part of that means that, the way that it represents traffic is, when there's congestion, it builds up delay at that point, but you don't have propagation of the traffic back upstream. You don't have queuing and spillback. We use a zone system to understand space where people are coming from and going to. That obviously has limitations. This is based for forecasting. We're relying on the outputs from UrbanSim, which I think will probably be a wonderful resource and probably better than what could have been provided, especially at a regional level, prior to the UrbanSim model. But even so, that model is also a model and also wrong in some ways too. So that it's important for forecasting to always keep that limitation in mind as well. Next slide. So I think, though, together along with the reality, this kind of sobering reality check, I think it's important to, ask the question of are these models actually worthwhile? Can they be useful? And the first part of answering that is, can they produce reasonably accurate results? And the answer is yes. It's unfortunately not a lot of agencies really have a great system for keeping track of their forecasts and auditing them or whatnot. But Ohio DOT is one of the agencies that's really good about that. So they have the ability to look back and evaluate how well they have done with their forecasting. And as you can see here, they've done a great job over time. It's obviously not perfect, but if this kind of modeling is done well, it can do a reasonably good job of forecasting traffic for a variety of kinds of projects. So next slide. So more broadly, so what is it how are these models used? What are they used for? So I think these models are, again, they're macroscopic models. They're helpful for understanding the big picture trends, what's going on in the region, what's likely to, how that is likely to play out or evolve into the future. So that is, so it really is helpful at a high level of thinking about planning. first kind of and foremost. And so one of the ways that is often comes into play or is applied is to identify deficiencies, to look at the future and look at where there are new problems, or where existing problems are really exacerbated. So that's one thing. Also, models. Some agencies use models as one component of their project selection or ranking process. TDOT did that, in their previous long-range plan. There's nowhere that I know of that bases their project prioritization entirely on modeling, and I think that obviously would be kind of ridiculous. But it is helpful for providing standardized metrics that are, be a helpful, part of a well thought out and kind of balanced project selection process. And many places models are used in that way, both at state and MPO levels. It can be, the model is often used to support special studies for sub areas and so forth. It's also, frequently used to produce project-specific design forecasts. Oftentimes, in those kinds of cases, the model is not being used out of the box. The model should be the prior sorts of applications. The model should be able to pretty well be used out of the box. But as you start to drill down to more detail, right, you have to be careful, and check how well the model is really representing. If you're starting to zoom in on a particular facility and so forth, you need to look at that and use judgment. And sometimes there are actually processes that are spelled out in NCHRP reports, like the one cited there, and how you can use models together with other information for project level design type forecasts. And oftentimes models also regional models provide inputs. Their outputs are used as inputs to support more detailed modeling that I was referring to earlier, things like Synchro, Transmodeler, Vism, things like that. Next slide. So there is a wide variety, a spectrum of designs for these types of travel demand models, from very simple models called three-step models, all the way up to kind of advanced, or sometimes it might be called next generation activity-based models. Next slide. There we go. Nashville, you can see there, the most common designs, though, are 3- and 4-step models and what we might call the standard activity-based model, which is what we've developed for you. There are more, agencies using these types of models than the others. There's examples of folks who use kind of all these different things. But by far, these few designs are the most common. Next slide. And partly because of this, oftentimes we simplify things and we refer, to different parts of the spectrum kind of together. Sometimes we just talk about 3- or 4-step models as trip-based or as traditional models. Oftentimes people talk about, any of the more advanced things as activity-based models, and stuff in the middle is often just called hybrids. Just in a way of giving you some background. Next slide. And more recently, there's also kind of both what might be called conventional or traditional, as well as now more data-driven versions of each of these that are leveraging, some of the new sources of big data that are available. And we have done that in this new version of your activity-based model. It's one of the focuses of our most recent efforts. And I think that it really has and is bearing fruit in producing a more accurate model, not surprisingly. Next slide. Just a little bit of background. Activity-based models existed first in academia. There are some inconsistencies, some real kind of problems with the traditional 3- and 4-step models that were used first historically, and that really irked a lot of professors. And so they began to formulate these activity-based models first in academia, but about 20 years ago, beginning with like Portland and San Francisco, some agencies began to develop them as practical tools and really found them useful, because they were able to address a number of things that the traditional models either didn't do well or couldn't do at all. And some of those things like understanding the impacts of built environment on travel behavior, being able to look at active transportation modes like walk and bike, being able to perform equity analyses to understand who is benefiting or impacted by different projects, being able to look at the temporal dimension of travel, effects like peak spreading in response to congestion, and also the ability to evaluate travel demand management strategies, like working from home. So obviously an important topic these days. The way that the models work, I don't want to get into too much, but just to, characterize a little bit, they are disaggregate models. They use individual travelers and households. We call that a synthetic population, as to simulate what's going on in the region. We use discrete choice models with all the variables that we can kind of muster. It's a Monte Carlo simulation for any of you that are familiar with that. That's a common technique used for a lot of things. And in terms of the data structures, it really works. It uses a relational database, which is something that probably many of you are familiar with. Next slide. Just to get a little terminology clear, when we talk about, in modeling, we often talk about trips and tours. And so this is an example of how we kind of analyze and understand travel patterns. Obviously, for the most part, people start and end their day at home. And so this would be a simple example of a tour. Tours are defined as starting and ending at home. People, of course, can make more than one tour in a day. And that tour could have one or more stops. So this is an example of a tour that has 2 stops or three trips. So the person goes from home to work. They go, and then after work, they stop at the supermarket on their way home. So 3 trips, 1 tour, 2 stops. Hopefully that's not too confusing, but this is just so that you're familiar with some of the language. And so part of the limitation of the traditional models is they looked at the trips atomistically and didn't take into account the way that trips have to fit together into tours. So next slide. This is the modeling framework it's called Daysim that we're using for your region, and that's used in many other regions across the U.S. There's several different parts of the model. The first parts are related to long-term choices in terms of where people work, whether the person is a full-time or a part-time worker or a student, and where they work or where they go to school. Also, how many vehicles each the household is going to own and operate. Then the next level of the model looks at as the level of the day. Basically, what are the key activities for the day? How many times are people or each member of the household going to leave home? Then following that, we look at each person's tour. Where are they going? What's their main mode, so to speak, which is largely about, do they take a car with them or not? And then we look down at the individual stop and trip level choices. So you may take a car with you to work, you may drive to work, but then you may walk to lunch and back. So that's kind of the trip level choices. So next slide. The components of this, you hear me referring to choices, and just so the model system is largely, not entirely, but largely built up out of discrete choice models, generally logit models of various sorts. These are econometric models based on random utility maximization. The formal theory for these models was developed by Daniel McFadden, who received a Nobel Prize for that work. It's nice because this gives us a good, firm behavioral basis for understanding and explaining and forecasting the behavior. It allows us to, again, take into account the context of people's choices. It allows us to account for, different ways that people travel, different ways that different people behave, and so forth. That's fine. Yeah, next slide. In terms of model inputs, the model is largely driven by socioeconomic or land use data, and together with network data, both transit and highway, as well as we use an all streets network for walk and bike. Next slide. One of the distinguishing features of activity-based models, that makes them different and better than traditional models, is that there is a lot more spatial detail. We use what we call microzones, which are not exactly, but very often the same thing as census blocks. There's, over 33,000 in the Nashville region. And part of, what the value of Urban Sim is that it'll be able to provide forecasts at this level to support the activity-based model. An all streets network is also used, as I was saying, for walk and bike. And part of the value of this is these two things together allow us to calculate accessibility variables, basically what's nearby. And, so the travelers in the model know what's within walking distance, right? And whether they're in a walkable area or not. So, downtown versus sort of the mall and whatnot in Mount Juliet both have a lot of employment, a lot of retail and a lot of restaurants and so forth, but they're very different areas, right? And so this is part of how that we reflect that in the model. Next slide. So we are able to take into account a lot of different traveler attributes. If you're interested in the details, they're there. But needless to say, not everybody travels and behaves in the same way. And we try to control for that. Next slide. We use a lot of data to try to validate the models. This is one of the key things that we do. On the network side, we have traffic counts and transit line ridership that we're comparing against. On the demand side, which is sort of the patterns side, we have big data, origin destination flows. We have the transit onboard survey, as well as census data on commute flows, and the 2012 regional survey. Next slide. As I was saying before, this is the first time that we've had big data to support the regional travel model. It gives us a lot better information on travel flows in the region, and I think it's leading to a much better model. One of the really valuable things about it is that from the big data, we're able to get information on visitors to the region, non-residents of the region, as well as residents. Whereas previously, when you conducted surveys like the household survey in 2012, it's focused on the residents of the region. And obviously, what with the growth of tourism in your region, visitors and visitor travel are increasingly important. So a fair bit of what we were trying to do in this update was to better account for and represent that in the model. Next slide. I'm going to go through these slides kind of quickly, but just showing you how we kind of look at various dimensions, validation of various dimensions of the model. So this is looking at the synthetic population and just showing you that we are able to create a synthetic population that really mirrors pretty well the basically within the limits of the accuracy of the census data itself. You know, what the census data is reflecting. Next slide. This is looking at work locations or commute flows. You can see here, this is against the census's LHD or loads data and against the 2012 survey. You can see that we are overall doing a very good job matching there. It's a log graph there, so we're under predicting really small flows a little bit, but overall doing very well. Next slide. And by the way, these are preliminary, not the final validations. We're going to be finalizing the validation in the next week or two. It's very close to final, but some of these things may still improve a little bit. This is looking at tours in the region by purpose, by person type, and by mode. You can see that we're doing a good job of replicating the observed travel in the region. Next slide. This is looking at the temporal dimension. You know, when people arrive at work, when people leave work, when people are going other places. And again, the model is validating well. Next slide. And finally, again, well, not finally, but against on the network side of things. And again, this is still preliminary, and this will hopefully even get a little bit better. But you can see here we're already doing quite well in terms of replicating travel counts individually and across various screen lines. Next slide. Similarly, on the transit side, you can see that we're doing a good job of replicating your transit line ridership. Next slide. So in terms of the outputs of the model, it can produce, you know, the sorts of things that traditional models do, like roadway volumes and travel times, transit line ridership. But it also can produce, part of what you know is really different is that it can give it produces results at the level of individual simulated trips and tours by individual travelers and households. And so that allows us to summarize the results in lots of different ways. So by, you know, one of the interesting things for equity analysis is being able to summarize the results by household or person attributes. And so you can see here an example of that. You can look at, you know, for instance, single parent households, zero vehicle households, seniors, low income populations, things like this, which is so very powerful for equity analysis. You can also summarize results by time of day. You can look at different activity types or trip purposes. You can look at various different kinds of geographic units. So it's very flexible in the way that you can summarize results and use them for various types of analyses. Next slide. One quick analysis, one example of an analysis that the initial version of your Nashville regional activity-based model was used to support was a study for Williamson County. They were interested in, this was maybe a couple of years ago now, a project that we worked on with KCI. And this is, they had a simple, would seem a simple question, right? Which was, how much of the local traffic, the traffic on their local roads was by local residents? To answer the question, you know, we categorize things in folks into 5 different groups. Residents of the cities in Williamson County, residents kind of on the fringes of the city, but within their urban growth boundaries, residents, you know, other residents of Williamson County in the non-incorporated areas, residents, people who live outside the county but within the Nashville region, and then people who live outside the Nashville region. So this is a question that is in some ways an important and in some sense a simple question, but is actually really difficult to answer with a traditional travel model, but is something that we can answer with an activity-based model like yours. So next slide. so our analysis with your model showed that the present, a little over half of the travelers on Williamson County roadways are not residents of Williamson County. But as we go to, look into the future, by 2040, the majority of travelers on the roads in Williamson County would be expected to be residents of the county, although there still be a sizable share of non-local residents as well. And so I think this was information that I think was helpful for them in thinking about, what is equitable in terms of, different funding mechanisms to support new infrastructure. Next slide. And this is a little bit more hypothetical. I don't have a concrete example here yet, but examples of ways that activity-based models can be more helpful for understanding transit and analyzing transit alternatives. It allows us to represent different fares for different people, with based on their age, their income, whether they're a university student, and so forth. This is something you can't do in a trip-based model, but we can do in the activity-based model. And we can reflect, household choices about vehicle ownership. There's also, in an activity-based model, nobody's going to take the bus to work if there's not a bus, or not generally. Almost no one will take the bus to work if there's not a bus to get home at night. If they get off later. So, the travelers think about the whole context of their tour when they're making choices. Also, that detail at the level of the microzones in the All Streets network allows us to understand, how easy it is to walk to the nearest bus stop and so forth. And partly from, for that reason, built environment affects stationary or ridership and so forth. And I believe that was it. I hope I didn't put too many of you to sleep here. I'll turn it back to Max. As I said, we're wrapping things up, and this is kind of the next steps as we're trying to finalize things. I'll let Max speak to any of these ones.
Perfect. Thank you, Vets. I think that was a very informative presentation. I hope everybody enjoyed it. In terms of how both the land use model output and the travel demand model output will ultimately be incorporated into the long range plan. First, we will work to get the pipeline development incorporated into the land use model, and then we'll be able to have a representation of vehicular conditions and transit conditions on the ABM that Vince just described, hopefully by May 15th. And then following that, we'll be working with the trend forecast, and that will be based on the pipeline information that we then finalize. So I can't stress enough, if you haven't turned that into us, to do that, because it will have an effect on the distribution of households and jobs, and ultimately the travel demand pattern in your area based on how those are loaded in. And then finally, we will be able to take the output from the land use model for the different horizon years in the future and have them modeled in the travel demand model, and then be able to use for project evaluation. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Glenn.
Thanks, Max. Are there any questions from the committee for Max or Vince?
Now, Max, this is Keith Free in Hendersonville, and we're finishing up on that pipeline update, and we will hopefully get that out to you later this afternoon.
Thank you.
All right. Any other follow-up questions? Sean, before we move to the next item, I would like to ask, on the previous action items, we made a motion to endorse the tip cycle C. Were we supposed to do that, or was that for informational purposes only at this time?
I think with our latest public participation plan, we don't require a endorsement from the TCC on those. The most important being the presentation of the materials so that you can see them. But sorry for the confusion on that.
No, that's fine. Should we rescind that motion to endorse TIP Cycle C?
I think we're okay. It's just not a requirement that we have to do that each time.
Okay, I apologize for that.
Well, this is Bill McCord. I asked that question when we were discussing that item, and it was directed that we needed to make a motion. So.
Yes, and I did that in error. I was mixed up on my notes. So just for to clean up the agenda, why don't I'll make a motion to rescind the previous motion to endorse TIP Cycle C amendments for consideration by the TPB. Can I get a second on that motion?
I'm just curious, does the maker of the motion make that motion? How does that work? Either the maker or the second of the initial motion that passed need to bring that up and to amend their motion? You understand what I'm saying?
This is Lou Edwards. Bill McCord made the motion and Katrina Jones seconded it.
Right. For parliamentary procedure, though, when someone makes a motion and it passes,
Don't make your motion, if you will.
Well, if we're going to entertain these amendments at the next meeting, let's say, I don't have a problem amending the motion. I don't want to amend the motion thinking that we're not endorsing these projects, though. So I would be glad to make a motion then if it's acceptable to the majority of the committee.
Let's just clarify for Cycle C amendments today. We are presenting them for your information. We'll be presenting them to the policy board for their information this same month, and then we'll release them for public review and comment, and then the amendments will come back before the TCC and the TPB before adoption.
Okay, then therefore motion to rescind the motion that I made for approval of Cycle C amendments.
Thanks, Bill and Michael. And if we could get, if Katrina's still on, to rescind the second.
I second that.
So we'll vote on rescinding that motion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. And again, I do apologize for that, but we will move on to item number 5, regular reports. The first is chair's report, and I don't have any items for that, so we'll turn it over to Sean for staff reports.
Thank you, Glenn. Just a couple things I wanted to remind folks about. We have a couple of meetings this month. The Regional Environmental Roundtable will have their second meeting next week on May 13th, starting at 10 a.m. Probably going to go an hour and a half and touch base on some of the environmental data layers that we're looking at to consider as part of the Unified Transportation Plan and use to inform project evaluation. We're also working with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and we'll be trying to identify a meeting this month to reconvene them. These both will likely be virtual meetings. And then I wanted to give folks a heads up if they haven't heard already, but through the Mayor's Caucus, GNRC has been working with the mayors pretty much meetings every Friday afternoon regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Just going over a lot of status updates to make sure everybody's on the same page, providing access to information, resources. There's a GNRC webpage now dedicated to COVID-19 resources. I'll put that in the chat box so that people can view that at their convenience. But just wanted to make sure that folks are aware that that's going on as well. Lastly, staff will be reaching out in the coming weeks as we finalize the review on some of the projects that have been submitted for the Unified Transportation Plan to make sure that we have all the relevant project information and budgets and narrative that we need in order to evaluate those. And then I think we may have touched base on this last time, but Anna, do you want to do a quick recap of the CARES Act?
Sure. We just wanted to make everyone aware that through the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, that the Nashville UZA and Murfreesboro UZAs have both received sums of money for transit. It's going to be provided at a 100% federal share. There's no local match required for the agencies that are going to be able to use it. The funding is available to support capital operating and other expenses that are generally eligible under the FTA formula programs. And it can be used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to ramifications from the pandemic, including paying employees who aren't able to work at this time. The Nashville UZA has split their overall funding received among Nashville MTA, RTA, Franklin Transit, and Williamson County. So we just wanted to make everyone aware that this sum of money had been received.
That's all on staff reports, and thank you, Glenn.
All right. That's all we have on staff reports. Looks like we have one item under other business here. The TDOT CMAQ grant awards update.
Jonathan, do you have any updates on the CMAQ awards? I think last time we heard that there were reviewing just the eligibility of a number of the applications, but if you have any other updates, just let us know.
Yeah, I don't. Brianna Benson in our office is the one over CMAQ updates. I thought she would be on, but apparently she's not. So I will get an update from her, and Sean, I'll have you distribute that to members.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Uh-huh.
Well, thank you all. With that, we will adjourn to the next TCC meeting scheduled for June the 3rd, 2020.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. Is anybody still there? I have a question about the next meeting.
Yes, we're here, Bill.
We'll be given notice if we're going to convene normally, the body as opposed to remote.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Our city hall opens on the 18th to the public, and we'll be having resume normal meetings. don't know if that's gonna be the case with MPO, but y'all will let us know by either email or some sort of other notice, right?
Yeah, we'll likely, when we distribute the packet, we'll notify you of the location within that packet, whether it's going to be virtual or at the bridge building.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay.
Thanks.